Good morning. We look today at Ezra chapters 3 through 8, combining yesterday and today's Old Testament reading. And the Israelites have returned and have begun planning the rebuilding of the temple. And in chapter 3, they lay the foundation. And, it says, when the 7th month had come and the Israelites were in the towns, they gathered together in Jerusalem. And they set out to build the altar of God as prescribed, in the law of Moses. And the other day I talked about the law of Moses as, not knowing if it was just, one book or if it was the whole Pentateuch. But references here refer more to just the book of Deuteronomy as being the law of Moses, or this scroll that they found anyway. But in the book, it gives explicit instructions as to the construction and everything. So they were following that and laying the foundation, and so it took a while for that. It was King Cyrus made the decree in 538 BC that the Israelites could return to Jerusalem and begin rebuilding the temple, and and it took them a little bit of while to get there and to get things going and everything. And verse 8 of chapter 3 says, in the 2nd year after their arrival, together with all of these people, they had come from captivity, and he made a beginning, to be the beginning of the laying of the foundation. And they appointed, Levites, some of the priests for this and that. And then as they laid the foundation, starting in verse 10, they were there celebrating, and the priests were blowing trumpets and praising and singing and shouting, and they were excited. And the other day I opened a file on my computer. It's Christensen videos of when I was growing up, and one of the first things that was on there was a backhoe digging the basement for Our Savior's Lutheran Church in McHenry, and how they were laying the cement in the floor, and the guys were down there and they were mixing it up on the level ground, and then they were coming down this ramp with the wheelbarrows full of cement. And to think about that today, they bring in a big cement truck, but to think about at 538 BC, 2,700 years ago, almost 2,800 years ago, they didn't have a wheelbarrow to mix the cement in. They didn't have cement to mix. They didn't have cement trucks to come and pipe it wherever. This was all done by hand, and the rocks were hewn, and all of this stuff was done by hand, manual, physical, hard labor. And I think it was 1960 when they started building the new church in McHenry, and it was just kind of fun to watch some of that goings on. And we've got videos of standing the rafters up. And it was just kind of interesting to watch some of that after all these years. I remember, as a young child watching and being in awe of some of the building skills. But here, they're doing this all by hand. And as so King Cyrus had made the proclamation in 538 BC that the Jews should go and start building, and it was under the reign of King Darius in 516 BC that the temple was completed, and they gathered together for their first worship. So 22 years. And I don't know, the temple, if they rebuilt it, on the original grounds and according to the original plans, it was a sizable building, and all the altars and all of the fixtures and everything in there. 22 years they took building the temple. And you think about a building going up today, if they took 22 years to build it, everybody would be upset, if it's not done tomorrow. It's too long a time. But they were building the temple, and as they laid the foundation and started going on other things, some of the other neighboring countries, the adversaries, and an adversary, anytime you hear that word is, trouble is on the rise when you hear an adversary coming. But people were upset by that because they didn't want to see the power return to these Israelites again. They remembered, previous years when Israel had been, or stories of them anyway, of their power and their might, and they didn't want these good things to happen again to the Israelites. Maybe some jealousies coming in. I mean, there's so much that goes on in the minds of people that way. But anyway, some of these countries came and they went to the current kings and complained. Well, you can't let these people be doing this because they're gonna quit paying taxes. They're gonna do this and they're gonna do that. And really, I mean, but it's just they look at the worst possible potential and come with complaints that way. But it continues and under the one of the kings then, King Cyrus, who had issued the proclamation in 538, died like in 529, and so then the new king came, and then it was like in 521 when this Darius became the king that was the one that the temple was finished under. But and I think it was after Darius or Xerxes. Anyway, there's so many kings and names, but these different kings, they went back and they found the decree of King Cyrus stating that this is going to happen by the order of the king, and nobody should get in the way of this. And if they do, if somebody impedes this building, they go into their house and tear down the rafters and make a hanging, facility and hang that person. This was the king's order, that if somebody got in the way of it, I think it was that was the right king that made that proclamation, in that. But it was very definite that this king had a vision or something from the God of the Jews, the God of the Israelites, that this temple should be rebuilt, and stuck very much to it that way. And as we read through, chapters 4 and 5, there are different letters to the different kings and letters from the kings to the Jews. And in chapter 6, King Darius makes a decree, and they searched the archives, where that they were stored, and that was when they found this record that the King Cyrus had issued this decree about the rebuilding of the temple. And then it tells us again of that decree and of the rebuilding and everything that's going on. And so then as we get into toward the end of chapter 6, the temple is finished in 516 under King Darius. And in verse 19, it says, on the 14th day of the first month, the returned exiles kept the Passover. And I remember reading not so long ago about how at the end of 2 Chronicles under King Josiah, the people celebrated the Passover, in accordance with the Mosaic law for the first time, and they not only for 7 days, but they did for 14 days because of the exuberance, because they were able to do that. And so now that the temple was rebuilt and restored, the Jewish people could again celebrate and observe the Passover in the correct manner, within the temple. And, previous to the temple being built in Jerusalem, they had, the tent of the tabernacle that they would move, and this is where they had done the Passover and all that. But for those years when the temple was gone, it was not able to do that. So they could observe the Passover, and they could observe the other Jewish Israelite rituals, celebrations that Moses had decreed, that God had decreed through Moses. And as we go on, it just talks about how they were able to celebrate and observe these religious festivals. And as chapter 7 begins, we're going to read more about Ezra and his prophecy, and in this time, Artaxerxes was the king between Cyrus and Darius, and it was, he was the one that people had come to and complaining. And in chapter 7, verse 21, we have this letter from King Artaxerxes to Ezra. And it's really a nice letter. I mean, I, King Artaxerxes, decree to all treasures in the province whatever the priest Ezra, the scribe of the law of God, requires, let it be done. And then he puts some limits on it, but then whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be done with zeal for the house of the God of heaven, or wrath will come down from the realm of the king and of his heirs. And so here this King Artaxerxes of Persia is recognizing, the God of Israel, the God of heaven, and talking about that. And I think it was earlier that, that there was reference to the temple that a great king of Israel had made, and that was, I think, back in chapter 5 or 6. It was in chapter 5, verse 11, and this great king, this was Solomon, the original building of the temple. So that these countries and these people are aware of the history of the Israelites and of Moses and of Solomon and of their kings and those things, and so it's just it's interesting and encouraging for me to see that these other people who wouldn't be faithful to the God of heaven see this. And in verse 25 of chapter 7 says, "And you, Ezra, according to the God-given wisdom you possess, appoint magistrates and judges." And so this King Artaxerxes is recognizing Ezra as a prophet, his wisdom, his leadership by God, and his God-given gifts that way. Chapter 8 deals with a lot, again, of some genealogy with the different people and the gathering by the river, the return to Jerusalem of many people of different tribes, and they give a lot of numbers in there, and there are some that say these numbers don't all add up to write what they are, but it's 6 of one and a half a dozen of the other as far as I'm concerned. But so the temple has been rebuilt. The people are returning from exile to Jerusalem and are again worshiping the God of their ancestors. And that's what we do. We worship the God of our ancestors, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as Christians, the triune God. And we celebrated that yesterday with Trinity Sunday. May the triune God richly bless you and guide you